Hey guys, Michael here from Dapper Raptor, and today we're going to take a look at how to move away from relying on tick for your logic updates. So if you've spent any time looking at tutorials, mine, Epic's, anyone else's, you will have noticed that a lot of people tell you to use tick for prototyping or as a part of tutorial, but a lot of times they will even say, shouldn't rely on tick, we're just doing this here because it's quick and easy. And that's true. Using tick for your logic updates is really good for prototyping because it's really simple to set up. So if you don't know, tick is called every single frame update, which means if you are running your game at 60 frames a second, the tick is going to execute 60 times. If you're running it at 120 frames a second, it's going to execute 120 times and so on. This can be problematic if you have complicated code on there because it can slow things down, but it can also present itself in other ways. So a good example of this is Fallout 76 came out with its movement rate tied to its tick rate. This meant that players were able to look at the ground to make their systems render faster because you're rendering less objects because of how object culling works, and they would get a much higher frame rate and they could move faster, effectively giving them speed hacks. So you can see immediately, hopefully with that example, why you don't want to have things tied to tick. Now you can get around that specific issue by adding a delay on tick. So in this case, we've got a system set up where we define how often we want our updates to run, in this case 20, and we do 1 divided by 20, so then we get the delay amount, and it will wait for 0.05 seconds before running this each time. And because of how delays work, it won't matter how many times this hits it, it's going to run. Like, it's only going to run 20 times a second. So that's the way you start moving away from tick. However, we can get all our logic entirely off tick using timers. So I've got a really simple health bar here, and in fact, I'll just show you what it does. It just has a really simple regen system. If I hit F, we lose 10% of the health, and it keeps regenerating. That's all we've got. So this is all currently tied to tick. Let's go about fixing that. So we're gonna break them, and I'm just gonna move that up here out of the way. This is our health update event. All it does, it goes through, takes our current health, adds the amount it should for this update, and then resets it and updates the UI. The amount it should update is determined by how much regen per second we want, normalized as a decimal, so we turn, say, 10 into 0.1, and then we divide it by our update frequency. Because we are updating 20 times a second in this example, we need to divide the amount per second by 20 for each update. Hopefully that makes sense. If not, that's not too important. All you need to know is that every single update, we're updating our health. So we can make this run on a timer by adding a timer to our begin play, because we want regen to start at the beginning of the game. So on our event begin play here, we're going to go over to the end, and we're just going to type in set timer by. Now you have two options here. You've got by event or by function name. I personally tend to use function name most of the time because I find it more versatile, but let's go through by event first and then we'll do the other one after. So once you add it in, you're going to get this node. Now it's really pretty simple to set this up. To tell it what event we want to run, we just need to drag from this node here to this, and that will automatically set that up. We want to use our time to determine how often the loop is running. And then we want to click on looping to make sure it is a looping event. And with that, we've actually got the exact same functionality we had using tick without it being tied to our frame rate. As you can see here, exact same setup. So let's take that a little bit further. Well, no, let's first of all get rid of this and take a look at the set by function name, because as I said, I tend to find this much more versatile because you can set this within other functions. You don't need to be able to quickly get to the event. It works with the event anyway. Other than that, it looks more or less the same. Instead of the orange square, we have this function name here, and you just type in the name of the function or event that you want it to run. So in this case, health update. Obviously, the only issue here is you need to make sure that your spelling is correct. If you have a spelling error in here, it's not going to work. But with that, we can see we, once again, have the exact same functionality. So now let's see how we can take timers and make them even more useful. You'll notice on both of the nodes, let's get the other one here as well, we have this return value. And if you hover over it, it's called a timer handle structure. So what we can do with this is we can save this as a variable and just call this regen timer. Call it whatever we want. This allows us to refer back to this timer at a later date. So what we can do is we can actually set it up so that the health regen will stop when we take damage. So my simple damage function here is when I press F, we take 10 damage. That damage is normalized as a decimal point, taken off of the current health, and then updated. So let's add in a little reference to this regen timer here, and we're going to look for pause timer by handle. We're going to hook that up there, compile and save, and we're going to hit play. Now when I take damage, you're going to notice the timer has stopped. We are no longer regenerating health. That's what we want. But what if we want the timer to then start up again after a certain amount of time? Well, then we can do this. We can go delay, let's say we want 2 seconds, and we just do the inverse. So we grab our regen timer and we go unpause. Compile and save. When we take damage, it's going to pause for 2 seconds and then it's going to start up again. Now we can do even better than this. We can get rid of the delay node. Sort of. There's other ways to do this. So this would work fine. However, you might find scenarios where you're doing this inside a function where you can't use a delay node, or you might have timers where you're not sure they're going to start up again. We're probably always going to have health regen in this scenario because we've got it starting on startup, but we might not. So let's get rid of pause and unpause and the delay. And we're going to drag off regen here, off the regen timer, and we're going to go clear and invalidate timer by handle. Now what this will do is it will completely stop the timer and it will make this reference no longer point to this. So that will effectively give us the same result as pausing it, but we will no longer be able to unpause. So what we can do then is after this, we can drag off of here and we can set a new timer. And we'll just use the timer by function name. Again, you could use the event one here, but the good thing about this is you can do this inside of functions. It doesn't need to be on the event graph. So we're going to write in health update. We're going to once again copy and paste our time there. I'm going to set it to looping, and then we're going to go to this section here, initial start delay, and we're going to set that to 2 seconds. And then finally, we're just going to make sure that we update this again, so that we can do this multiple times. Now, the benefit of this is actually a couple of things. Not only do we have less nodes in here, we can do this in functions, but what this is going to do is if we take damage and then wait 2 seconds, it's going to restart it. But if we take damage, a second pass, and then we take damage again, because we are clearing this, it's going to reset this delay here. So we can demonstrate that. Just let health go up a bit, take damage, wait 2 seconds. Okay, so we'll take damage, we'll wait, take damage again, and you'll see that it takes a full 2 seconds before it kicks in again. So you can do a lot of things with timers, way more than just this, but this should give you a starting point to start working with them. Just be aware that using tick is perfectly okay for prototyping, getting systems up and running really quickly, all that sort of thing. But you do really want to move as much logic away from tick. And by having them on timers, it actually gives you the control to have how often they update, how much they impact your performance, all that sort of thing. You could, play around with this so that maybe your player doesn't need to have the update every 20 seconds. Maybe the UI can, instead, what you can do is go through and do the maths once a second, but have the UI animate more often or something like that. That sort of thing. They're really useful and really good to get used to working with. Just one final thing I want to add here is that when you are working with timers, you need to be careful not to be using input on your functions and events that you're calling. So for instance, here, if I had an input where instead of health update, adding this amount, I was adding this amount, there's no way to tell the timer that input. So you're actually, I believe it won't even work, but the best case scenario is just going to be a null input. So if you, in that case, what you would want to do is, I guess, leave that there, and you would want to have something like a custom event that's health update on timer, and then you would call health update and set the input there. So then you could point this update to here instead. But it's just something to be aware of, that you can still do the loop with an input, but you can't put the input into the timer directly. Hope that makes sense.